What's going on, everybody? We're going to talk about some Cleanspark news. We have some news that dropped today and some news that dropped the other day in terms of some exahash growth, some recently acquired sites. We're going to talk about all that. We're also going to talk about PPI, and we do have jobless claims to talk about as well. Now, this article, I'll link down below, provides a quick summary. Jobless claims increased 2,000 to now 230,000. Continuing claims rise 5,000 to now a 1.85 million. And PPI is up 0.2% in August and up 1.7% year over year, well under previous reads. Now, if you guys watched my previous video, you would have seen that the CME Fedwatch tool was 85% probability of a 25 basis point cut and a 15% probability of a 50 basis point cut. And for some reason, this article is saying the combination of a fairly stable labor market and still high inflation, I don't agree with that, further diminished the chances of the Fed Reserve cutting interest rates by 50 basis points when the US bank is expected to start its long-awaited easing cycle. This didn't further diminish anything. The Fed Watch tool is still exactly the same as it was yesterday. It seems that the market is still expecting a 25 basis point cut in the same magnitude that they were yesterday and the same magnitude they were before PPI even came out. I just feel like these articles, I wish they would fact check their own articles, or at least do a tiny bit of research instead of just have it being written by AI, which I think is the case here. Now, here's a cool graph that slightly redeems this article. We have core CPI, core PCE, core PPI, average hourly earnings, and the Fed target. Here's the Fed's 2% target, which now the Fed's target is taking a sideline to jobless claims, to unemployment. The Fed needs to fix the labor market, and hopefully from here we can continue to see inflation easing rather than ticking up. That would be very worrisome. But you'll see all of these metrics that were much higher in the 5s, 6s, and 7s are now getting towards 2. I mean, I would say the trajectory is still heading down. And one thing to realize about these core reads is they exclude food and energy. They exclude things that we have to pay for. So what's the point of that? Why are we ignoring things because they're volatile in price? Well, we still have to pay for them. So what's the difference? The interesting thing, at least from my research, is if you included these numbers would all basically be much lower at this point in time. And I wanted to show you where PPI has been going. I mean, look at this huge drop we saw. We were up in the 10% inflation for PPI, and it went all the way down to a 0.2, and nearly deflationary, not just disinflationary, but deflationary, nearly. It ticked up shortly after that, went all the way up to the high 2s again, and now we're heading back down. We're under 2. We had a read of 1.7%, and PPI is typically a leading inflation read, so hopefully we can see CPI and upcoming PCE follow suit and cool off a little bit as well. But just to show you guys the CME Fedwatch tool, we are still expecting the same as yesterday, 85% probability of a 25 basis point cut, a 0.25% cut, and a 15% probability of a larger cut, a 0.5 or a 50 basis point cut. So PPI changed literally nothing. I don't know what that article was talking about. Now, our next catalyst in terms of inflation reads is going to be PCE, and this is going to release on September 27. And as of late, what we've been getting from PCE is pretty much the mid 2s. It was in the high 2s back in April and May. Now we're back into the mid 2s, July and June. Hopefully we can get this into the low 2s. That would be a nice sign of the direction we're going. A nice sign that, hey, if the Fed does start cutting rates, inflation isn't going to suddenly tick up out of nowhere. We need inflation to accommodate the Fed cutting rates and trying to help the labor market. Now let's talk about Cleanspark. We have some pretty exciting stuff to talk about. First off, this came out today. Cleanspark's hash rate exceeds a 26 exahash per second. Recent expansions totaling 65 megawatts of capacity increased the company hash rate by 3.2 exahash per second. And they announced today that they have energized the 50 megawatts final phase of their 150 megawatt expansion in Sandersville, Georgia. And as said by Zach Bradford, the past week has been monumental for Cleanspark, marked by the full energization of our expansions in Sandersville and Dalton, both in Georgia, along with the acquisition of 7 facilities in Tennessee. These efforts have allowed us to rapidly expand our hash rate, which we now expect to reach 37 exahash before the end of 2024. I'm incredibly grateful for the local community. Our partnership with Sandersville is a prime example of how Bitcoin miners and communities can thrive together. Ooh, is that a little jab at Mara? Perhaps. And speaking of Mara, I want to do a little research and see by end of year who is gonna top who out. Is Cleanspark finally going to surpass Mara in hash rate, start catching up in terms of market cap? Is Cleanspark going to become the world's largest and best Bitcoin miner? We will see. Now we have this article that came out yesterday going into more detail of these 7 Tennessee sites. This is basically the news of that. And it's titled Cleanspark to add a 5 exahash, increase their 2024 guidance, as I told you guys, with acquisition of 7 additional Bitcoin mining facilities in Tennessee. And this is for a total of total cash payment of $27.5 million, $324,000 per megawatt. And they expect to close each of these sites on or before September 25 of 2024. The operating hash rate of these combined facilities is anticipated to result in 5 exahash once the miners are installed S21 Pros, which will increase Cleanspark's current hash rate by over 22%. And the miners required for this expansion have recently arrived. They're going to be installed promptly upon the closing of each site. And the 7 sites total at 85 megawatt and range from 10 to 20. These are relatively small sites. With the energization of Dalton 4 last week, we already surpassed 23 exahash. Expect more hash rate to come online this week from the energization of 50 megawatts of S21 Pros in Sandersville. With this additional 5 exahash expected to begin hashing over the coming weeks, we now expect to achieve 37 exahash before the end of 2024. As previously discussed, our timing on the market of mining server purchases intentionally locked in low prices so that we could take advantage of opportunities like this and immediately fill acquired data center space. The grid acquisition, which was our recent closing in Wyoming, and now the new transaction represents the continued execution of our growth strategy. Tennessee has a similar political and energy environment to Georgia, where we've developed nearly $1 billion of capital and operate nearly 500 megawatts. Applying the same winning community-oriented strategy to the volunteer state is our plan as we expand our presence in the region, continue showcasing how Bitcoin can benefit the local power grid and communities and yada yada yada. Now, despite Cleanspark as a company firing on all cylinders, continuing to expand, continuing to aggressively grow that hash rate, continuing to purchase sites at good prices because of this pullback, because of miners being so beaten down, because of Bitcoin's pullback, Cleanspark's making all the right moves in my opinion. And this recent dilution is what broke this trend, what broke this support. We sold off, we gapped down. There was news of dilution recently, somewhat recently I guess. And while this is a short-term negative, a couple months from now we will look back and say, hey, actually that dilution was a good thing. These guys have a ton more money, they're ready to expand even more, and they are ready to pass Marathon. They are ready to become the largest Bitcoin miner. Not that that's necessarily all that matters, but it is something that I expect to happen with Cleanspark. I do think they're going to pass Mara, but I do want to look more into Mara and what their growth plans are. Now, we do have 2 things I'm watching for Cleanspark. First off, obviously our low is going to be important, this $8. If it doesn't hold up, I do think we're going to fill our gap down here in the 7s, mid 7s or so right here. And I would expect, one thing though is we are trying to hold up our previous resistance back here as a support, which is like right under that gap. So if we do fill that gap, we will also likely bounce off this previous resistance that kind of played out as a support zone, support area. But that's not it. We also have a gap to the upside, a gap in the 10s, and another gap in the 13 area. In the end, if you love this company long term, you don't care about price, you're trying to scoop it up while it's low. Short term, if you're looking at it from a chart perspective, you might want to see it bottom out. Our moving averages are very far away. We're likely to retrace towards them, but they are looking bearish. They are flipping negative. The shorter term time frames are flipping the longer term time frames. That's not a good sign. On the RSI, Cleanspark is oversold, and when we have seen it at these oversold levels, look every single time. Oversold here, oversold here, oversold here. What did we see? Not just taking a while after a drop or anything like that, but literally a bounce right after that. We reached oversold and we bounced, we rallied. We reached oversold, we basically rallied from there. Didn't see lower prices. We reached oversold here, almost, didn't sell off anymore. We're reaching oversold here. Are we going to sell off more than this point? This might be that bouncing point. When you're in an overall bull market, if you believe it's a bull market, you want to buy while oversold. You want to buy while there's pain in the market. You want to buy when things are fearful, especially if we're talking about a company that you love long term. Now, what do you guys think about PPI, this unemployment data, and how are you feeling about this recent Cleanspark news? How are you feeling about the chart? It is nice seeing these Bitcoin miners recently making a recovery. I do think Bitcoin needs to break that $68,000 area. It is turning out to be a very crucial zone to break, and I do think when Bitcoin finally breaks that 58, goes on to take out its 50 MA, I do think when we look in hindsight that 49K back in August, that will turn out to be the low. There's a lot of fear during that point. It seems like the fear is slightly subsiding. Mt. Gox, everyone's forgetting about. We don't have any updates from them recently. I do believe they have one last payment. And of course, we have FTX customers getting paid out in cash. We might have that flow somewhat into Bitcoin, into crypto. We also have other creditors that have been paid out, such as Celsius. They're mostly done with their bankruptcy payout. And what else? We have spot Bitcoin ETFs finally going back to inflows. We'll see what today brings us. And we're getting through September. We're on our way to rate cuts, and we're coming up into October, coming up into Q4 of this year. This is a halving year. We should see a rally. And 2025, I still expect to be very exciting. Bitcoin on exchanges is reaching lows we haven't seen for multiple years. I do think the bull run will continue, but if you have reasons to believe otherwise, let me know in the comments below. I'm always interested in hearing your opinion. Thanks as always for watching, guys, and I'll see you next time.